Hi, it's Dennis Daly. Many of the phone calls I got at UPI were from, Hi, it's Dennis Daly. When you do an interview show, you get a lot of phone calls from press agents wanting you to interview their client, usually a book author. And more than 60% of those books dealt with health or dieting. On this interview, we talked to a woman who's happy about the fact she's not necessarily slim. We are joined in the Los Angeles studios of United Press International by CATHERINE Lippincott. She's written a great book called Well-Rounded, 8 Simple Ways for Changing Your Life and Not Your Size. And what we're going to be talking about on American Montage is if you are a little bit pudgier than your friends would like, but you feel good about it, how to feel good about yourself, and maybe at the same time, because you change your attitude, you just might lose some weight. CATHERINE, thanks for joining us. It's a great book. It's an easy read, nice big print. I like that. Step-by-step kind of things to do, ways to feel better about yourself. First of all, let's talk a little bit about you. Where are you from? Is this your first book? How did you get into publishing? Just kind of start from square one, if you will.
I am from Texas, or Houston, Texas originally.
No accent.
No, I had that removed at a very young age. Knowing I'd have to do radio shows and television shows across the country at the age of 6, I just had it completely removed.
Listen, I can still do my Southern Indiana accent if you want to hear it.
Oh, I'd love to.
Let's do that later. Go ahead.
I'm originally from Texas, and I sort of consider myself more of an East Coast person. I've lived in New York and Washington, D.C. for the past 12 years. And during that time, I began plus-size modeling. Actually, throughout my whole life, I've been a big person. I was a big child, a big teenager, and now a big woman. I mean, I'm 5'10". I wear a size 16, 18. I am not what you see in the fashion magazines. However, I have been a successful plus-size model for at least 10 of those years. And my writing the book really came out of my experiences from modeling, talking to thousands of women about their own bodies and having them approach me and ask questions that I found, hey, I know how to answer that. You do this, or why don't you try this? And that just comes from years of working and frankly living in a well-rounded body myself.
Neither one of us is large to the point that people look across the street, and there are unfortunately some people who are very, very heavy. But I had a friend of mine in D.C. before I moved out here said, they're much more body conscious in California. Said, you've got to start wearing better clothes, get rid of your sweatpants, lose enough weight you can tuck your shirt in. And I said, why? And he said, well, that bias about size is still out there. And he started telling me a story of a friend of his who he knew was denied a job because they just did not fit that nice little corporate, mold. Mm-hmm. You're very successful at what you do. What would you tell to people who are happy with the way they look but realize other people aren't? I mean, for example, Elizabeth Taylor. I'm sick and tired of people demanding that she be thin. I mean, it's her business.
Right.
She doesn't owe that to us. But there are these millions of jokes. How do you treat that issue?
Well, I tell you, I found from my experience that once I became comfortable with myself, once I realized that I wasn't going to be much smaller than a size 14 or 16 on a small day, once I realized that my happiness was not tied up with the number on the scale, once all of those things became very self-evident and I started practicing them, I started, thinking about my body in a different way. When all that started to happen, everything turned around in my life. And I mean, it wasn't, overnight success or any of that, but the positive attitude that I had about my body started to have repercussions in other areas of my life. I was feeling good about myself, hence I wasn't looking in the mirror saying, oh, I hate my body, I'm so fat, I hate myself. And once I got over it, the world got over it. And to answer your question, yes, discrimination of all types exists in the world today.
What if you are a little heftier than people think you should be? Well, CATHERINE Lippincott is here. She is an attractive woman who maybe is not as slim as she would like to be, but she's written a book for all of us who feel that we're okay and maybe want to stay that way or drop a little weight in the meantime. CATHERINE joins us here in our studios in Los Angeles. Isn't it easy if you get into that mindset and you're not happy with your weight and you check the scales twice a day and you're dieting all your life, to not have the opportunity then to go on with the rest of your life? I mean, I think you're absolutely right that people know when you don't like yourself.
Of course they know when you don't like yourself. Potential employers know when you don't like yourself. Potential boyfriends, girlfriends, relationships, friends, whatever it might be, it's very evident when a person is unhappy with his or herself. And my message for women and for men, frankly, is, you've got to find ways to appreciate what you have today. A great deal of my book is really specifically about finding ways to accentuate your positives, find things you like about your body, learn to move past it, learn to celebrate your body. And it's also a lesson in how to look at the images that surround us in the media, the supermodels and all of these people we see all over the place that are this little twiggy thin. And I'm really a proponent of equal representation. I love the fashion magazines. I read them all because I'm a fashion person. I happen to work in the fashion business, so I have to. But what would delight me is to see an image of a beautiful size 4 modeling something on the left-hand side of the page and a beautiful size 14 modeling something else on the right-hand side of the page. I just think that we need to present different body images, different body types, because it's been my experience that healthy, beautiful bodies come in all shapes and sizes.
This may be an extreme on the other end, but I had another conversation with a friend of mine about weight about a month ago, and I said, it's really funny. I kind of lead 2 lives. I go back to rural Indiana quite often, and people who grow up in urban areas, the gym mentality, don't realize that there is another America out there, and it's not just hee-haw. But you see guys my age who are 50 or 60 pounds heavier, maybe to the point where it's not healthy, but they're wearing bib overalls, have no consciousness at all of fashion, are leading a happy, productive life with kids and family and grandkids and everything, and never stop to think that as far as Madison Avenue is concerned, they look like junior samples, But there's not that pressure out there to conform. And I mean, as much of it as I feel, thank goodness, when I was in high school, I didn't face that. I was a cheerleader. I was a lot thinner than I am now. But the fact that the kids must just, with the pressure and all of these magazines, not just fashion, but on the men's side, all these fitness magazines that are falling off the rack now, the peer group pressure must be enormous.
It is enormous. I mean, I happen to know there are some statistics that are being bantered around these days about young girls, that 80% of young girls before the age of 12 have already dieted. And generally, before the age of 12, have already been on a diet, if not more than one diet. Which
when I grew up, if you weren't 12 yet, you were still a toddler. I mean, this was like...
Right, I know.
You were out there, on the slides in the gym set. You had no idea of adolescence yet.
No, absolutely. And the pressure is enormous. I recall the pressure from growing up. As I told you, I was a fat kid, for lack of a better way to say it. And mostly the pressure came from family members who were ingrained in this thought process of thin is better, thin equals happiness, thin is it, which is very funny considering they were all big people. I mean,
and the same mom who will tell you clear your plate will in another conversation caution you about gaining too much weight. I mean, it's like management in companies. Nobody's told them you can't have it both ways.
Oh, I know. I know. You brought up something that's so interesting about the difference between men and women and how they perceive their weight. I'm glad you brought it up because you're bringing up issues that, yes, there are men who look at the magazines, these same type of bodybuilding magazines, and see these buff cut guys and think, oh, I can never live up to that. I always look to men as role models, however, because if 2 women sit down to lunch, the first thing, or one of the first 3 things they're going to talk about is, oh, how do I look? Oh, you look great. You look so thin. No, I'm really fat. I gained 5 pounds. I mean, that is the first thing that comes out of a woman's mouth, talking to another woman. Now, 2 guys sit down to lunch.
How about those Orioles?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or how about my golf score yesterday?
Or my computer, well, I can't get the darn thing to boot up.
Exactly.
I'll give you a story you can tell when you're doing these interviews. This actually happened. A friend of mine lives in Key West, Florida. Made the acquaintance of a guy who's a professional model from Atlanta. They got to know each other. The guy from Atlanta says, hey, a buddy of mine's flying in from Dallas. my friend took him to the airport, which in Key West is like a renovated Texaco station, you know. And he apparently picked the guy up, and this is an old friend of the model whom he hadn't seen in 2 years. Their first words were not hello. He said, "Have you had a chance to work out today?" And my buddy said to me, I felt like telling them, the question should be, have you had the chance to find a good restaurant today? You know?
Yeah, exactly. No, we are undoubtedly a culture that is obsessed with body image and with weight and with the way we look. And, you know, to a certain extent, I believe in that, and it's only to this extent. It's to the health issue. It's to, I wish we could take the emphasis off of, if you diet, you'll wear a size 8 and your life will be perfect, but rather, if you alter your eating patterns so that you feel good every single day. There are ways that you can eat that you would wake up feeling horrible. And I just made a mental decision to not eat like that anymore, mostly for the fact that I wanted to feel good the next day. So that's how I choose. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but
I don't know how I do it yet. One of my goals about moving out here in California is to eat better because, and my listeners know this, I have a chronically bad digestion. I mean, I live on Rolaids, but yet when I eat more yogurt and less beef and know what I'm doing, I not only stay in better shape, I don't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning rolling over, having this knife stuck in my stomach.
Right.
How counterproductive does it get to some people? For example, my sister doesn't hear this program, so I'll say this. My sister is a very large woman, rather reclusive now, 41, has gotten to the point that because she doesn't like herself, she doesn't go out because she thinks no one will look at her, so she stays inside and eats. And it becomes this big, vicious circle.
It's the negative cycle. And the only way to break out of that, because I was in that cycle, is to find a way to find something you like about yourself. If negativity is spinning around and around and around, the only way out is a positive. So it might take a little introspection. It might take a little bit of thinking long and hard. It might take a lot of things. But the way out is to say, you know what? God, when I'm around my friends, they laugh because I know I'm funny. I know I can make people laugh. Or when I'm with my sister's children, they adore me. They just love me. They want to sit on my... Whatever it is, you have to begin to focus on the positives. And this is the real key to starting the process of beginning to like your well-rounded self. It's also about making the decision that you want to feel good. You know, you have mentioned that you walk and when you watch certain things certain ways, you feel better. And to me, again, it was about a feeling of I wanted to wake up every morning and feel good. And when I stopped dieting, I lost 60 pounds because I was basing it on how I wanted to feel, not what dress size I wanted to wear. You know, I've been up and down. I've been a 12 and I've been a 24, and for the last 10 or so years, I've been a 16.
So you averaged it.
You got it. And that's what it's about. Finding the comfortable place where you can move, you can breathe, you can eat, you can dress, you can do everything you want to do, and you're really feeling good about yourself.
Catherine, what do you suggest in the book? Let's get into self-esteem first. What can a person do, just as far as we see all these makeovers on television, as far as knowing what color, what kind of clothes, that whole area?
Well, the first thing one needs to do is take a long look in the mirror. And so many times people who are divorced from their bodies, you know, they shy away from mirrors. At one point in my life, when I was feeling really crummy about myself, I looked around my house and there was not one mirror that was a full length. They were all, you know, neck up or something like that. Little mirrors.
What we call shaving mirrors.
Shaving mirrors, exactly. And I realized, hey, this is sort of a denial. I'm not willing to look at myself from head to toe. It's very important because only by looking in the mirror and figuring out the parts of our bodies that we do like are we able to start this whole deal with getting dressed and getting out the door and feeling good. I used to dwell on the negatives. I would look in a mirror and I would say, okay, I hate my stomach. I have a big stomach. I don't like it. I hate it, whatever. The change came when I decided, okay, I can still have those feelings if I desire to have them, but I'm going to challenge myself to find 3 things that I do like about my body. And that's where it starts. And you know what? I've worked with many, many, many women in front of the mirror doing this very exercise, and usually they complain, I don't want to stand in front of the mirror, I don't like anything, nothing about my body. And we stand there, and sure enough, 1, 2, or 3 things always come out. We forget about them because we're so used to dwelling on the negative. So that's really the first step to figuring out how to dress your body, is to figure out which parts of your body you want to emphasize. What do you like? Do you like your legs? Do you like your cleavage? Do you like your eyes? Do you like, which parts? And from there, you can build the rest of your wardrobe.
Is there any kind of common personality thread that you have found in dealing with people like that? I mean, the temptation is, and I'm loath to use the word fat here because I think there's a fine line between fat and adequate. The fat people are jovial. And I'm wondering if you've run across people who've tried to compensate the other way by really being larger than life, not just physically, but also psychologically.
I think compensation, which is the word you used, is a big part of what goes on with plus-size people. It happened with me for years. I not only was trying to be the funniest, the most jovial, as you say, but I was trying to be the best student, the best daughter, the best. I was trying to take care of everyone else in the ball game except for myself. I was not looking after me. And that was an enormous revelation. And once I started to say, hey, I can take care of everybody, but not before Catherine has time for her, 30-minute soak in the bubble bath, or whatever it is that really makes you happy and lets you feel like you're taking care of yourself. Because the compensation does happen. We try and be funny, and we try and take the emphasis off of the size, thinking, oh God, they're going to notice I'm fat. I'm not scared of the word fat, by the way. Okay. So we, we're taking the emphasis off of that, and so I better dance faster. I better do this better. I better. And all those things are okay, except they really eventually wear us out.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it used to bother me that some people comedically, like the late Toady Fields, would play on her weight in order to be funny, in order to use that comedically. Or I'm not saying I thought that was pathetic, but I always felt uncomfortable when I would see a fat comedian, and that was their routine.
Like Roseanne?
Like Roseanne, yeah.
Same idea there.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I think Roseanne has done a lot for women in this country, because what she's done is show that, she's a tough woman. She has her family. She works. She does her thing. Well, I guess she doesn't work anymore now that she's won the lotto, as we all know, if you've been keeping up with the show. But before, she was that woman in America that you were talking about, that's out there in Indiana and just trying to keep it all together. And her weight was always secondary. I'm talking about in the show. She was doing what she could do as Roseanne Connor in that show. And I think that's good, because it presented another body image to America. I mean, would the show have been the same with a size 6 women playing the part? I don't know. I mean, maybe, but how...
It's hard to say because we don't know her that way.
Right.
We're used to it the other way.
Exactly.
If you would expound a little bit more what you talk about in the book about feeling satisfied with yourself. You brought up an interesting point earlier, and that is there's a point at which, if it doesn't become obesity to the point that it endangers your health, you can feel comfortable. I mean, I have friends who say, oh, Dennis, you don't look like the cheerleader you used to. Drop 30 pounds. Move to L.A., drop 30 pounds. I feel better than I have in years. Well, now, maybe I would feel better if I dropped 30 pounds, but, as long as there's not anything clinically wrong with me at this point, I feel satisfied.
Well, then you're okay. In my book, you're okay. My bottom line is really to get people to that point of feeling, as you say, satisfied. Even better than satisfied, feeling great. It's about the everyday feeling. Once again, I keep going back to that, but it's so important that we're doing things for ourselves now that are not tied up with wearing a smaller size or having abs of steel or wearing the string bikini we see on the pages of fashion magazines. Instead, we're doing things because they make us feel good, because we wake up in the morning and we want to go outside and take the walk, and we wake up in the morning and we want to eat a fresh bowl of fruit with granola, whatever it is, whatever makes you feel right. You're doing it because of the way you feel today, not some nebulous goal in the future.
This may sound like a really naive question, Let me preface it by telling you something my dad always did. My dad, well, first of all, my dad couldn't stand wealth. Just loathed anybody. I don't think he asked for a raise in 38 years with Montgomery Ward. He wouldn't have gotten it anyway. But he would see, you watch CNN now, you see Elsa Clench, and she's in Monaco, and some guy is trotting out his new spring fashions. My dad would see fashion shows, and he swore up and down no one ever wore those clothes. That it was that the fashion show was an entertainment event devoid of any future commercialization. That there was one dress of that model made for that model, and that's the only time you ever saw it. My question is, what percentage of women are actually thin enough to get into that supermodel mold to wear that? And if that's a small percentage, why don't we see more fashion models who are of average size that I feel is a larger proportion of the population?
Great question. Is your dad still alive?
No.
Because if he were, I would tell him he's right. I mean, it is true. Many of the garments you see on runways are never made. They are made, runway fashion shows are more than anything else to promote an image. It's pushing a very strong visual image that will filter down into clothing trends over the next season. What you see on the runway...
So you're planting a seed.
Yeah, you're planting a seed.
The haute couture is planting a seed for J.C. Penney's.
You got it. It's going to filter down. It takes time. It might take a year between getting from the runway to J.C. Penney's, but within 3 months or 2 months, it'll be in your Nordstrom. It'll be in your Bloomingdale.
And then a year later, it's at Kmart.
Yeah, but you know what else it'll be? It won't be with the zipper down to the navel and cut up the side all the way and with backless and thongs. All that's done for dramatic effect for the runway, because who attends runway fashion shows? The press. What do the press need? They need a story. They need something to write about. They can't see the clothes that hang on the racks in Bloomingdale's or any store and have a story to write about them. Now, why there are not more models of different sizes on the runways in Milan and Paris and New York, I don't know the answer to that question. I wish there were. I think it would be good for the press, who primarily is the audience, to see a little variation. I think it would it would cause some interest. There is a new magazine that has just been published last week. It's called Mode, M-O-D-E, and it's available on newsstands. I've seen it. I happened to be in the premiere issue and did sort of an interview, but I was speaking to the editor over the weekend, and she told me that she is going to approach many of the fashion houses in Europe and suggest that they use a plus-size model in one of their shows and really push it and really say, this is, the demographic in America, and we need to start seeing different body types. And I hope it works. I mean, I wish her the best of luck. I'm not sure whether they're ready to do this yet. I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, but I think it's great that she's going to try.
I guess the question is, how much of the buying public for those types of magazines deal in fantasy and how much deals in reality? That maybe we see all of that, and even though we know we'll never be there, we feel obligated to idolize those people for some odd reason.
I should have clarified. Mode, actually, the magazine I just mentioned, is a new magazine just for plus sizes. They are a plus size magazine. But the other magazines you're talking about, the percentage of women that look like the fashion models, I don't know, 0.5%, 0.2% or less.
It's got to be.
Oh, yeah, it's tiny. It's probably less.
Yeah, I had a roommate who was a model for The Gap. And, he'd come out of his room in the morning, and I was saying to myself, how can this guy earn $800 an hour and look like that? And then he would show me some of the work he did, and he had this uncanny knack of being about 3 numbers better looking on camera than in real life. Yet I guess there are people the other way.
Sure there are.
But it's not somebody out there snapping a picture with a Kodak Instamatic. They make a career at that. And the other thing that I've learned recently is that they shoot 10,000 photos, and maybe 2 of them look good.
If they're lucky.
If they're lucky?
If they're lucky, 2 of them look good.
That's why you hear
Oh, that's that automatic clicker that just goes like crazy. It's true. And now, actually, in this day and age, they've moved into, the super techie. After a photograph they've decided on the cover shot or whatever it might be for a fashion magazine, it then goes to a separate company where they pay close anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 for retouching. In other words, oh, look at her. Look at, supermodel number one. She looks a little puffy. She must have gone out the night before the shoot. Let's go ahead and shave a pound off the left cheek. Let's cover up that pimple on her chin. I mean, the amount
Let's make the legs longer.
Let's make the legs longer.
Anything you want.
That's happened.
Sure.
That is absolutely. Let's make the legs longer. Let's make the breasts bigger. The point here is that we still want to look at really fun images in magazines. I think there should be different body types for us to look at, and I think that women really need to be educated when they're looking at these pictures.
What do you tell women who do not have good self-image, other than colors, clothes, things they can do? I mean, a friend of mine, and I mentioned walking, I would assume that something as simple as spending 3 minutes a day walking, parking your car a block from where you have to be, not taking it to the grocery if you're 3 blocks away.
Absolutely. I mean, you've hit upon the 8th step in my book, which is movement. I call it movement because growing up as a fat kid, if you said exercise, it would just remind me of a PE class.
Oh, yeah.
And getting chosen last for the team, or standing there, having the gym shorts be too tight, something horrific. So I call it movement, but it's basically the same thing. We're talking about finding ways to move your body comfortably and realistically, not so it feels like punishment. I now walk as you do. I also run. I go to a number of dance classes. I do them for totally different reasons than I was thinking I should be doing them. I thought I should go because if I took an hour dance class, I would burn 700 calories and that would burn off whatever. I was always calculating in my head.
Gee, you could get rid of half a Big Mac.
Right. Exactly. Not even, I don't think, but exactly. Now I move because I like the way it makes me feel. We're back to that old today feeling. How do you feel today? Well, I happen to feel really good because I walked up and down the mountain up here in California, in Los Angeles this morning, at 7 a.m. I feel great. It's about the feeling today. It's not about if I work out and if I do 7,000 more ab crunches, then I'll be able to wear a thong this summer. It's just that is not part of my life anymore. And I think that you will be able to exercise or move or find a way to move your body comfortably for a longer period of time. You'll keep with it if you're not reaching for such unrealistic goals.
What has been the reaction to this book? What kinds of feedback have you gotten from the people who've read it?
I've gotten really, really wonderful feedback. I think I'm the most of the feedback. I've been writing it all down because I think it's books number 2, 3, 4, and 5 because I get all this information. Actually, in my book, I ask women, "What do you think of this? Will you write me back and tell me?" And how to create a wardrobe, how to approach your relationship with food, and then it ends with this step on movement because I think that's such an important addition to all of our lives is to really stay active and keep walking, Dennis. That's all I got to say.
That's it, huh?
Yeah. You're doing great. You're here in the right place to do it, too.
Now, as an aside, we were talking before going on the air about flying.
Yes.
And I think that since I love to fly and you've gotten over your fear of flying, we should fly somewhere sometime. Okay. We'll do a show about flying.
And then airline food.
That. We can talk about.
We could do the whole thing.
Food.
I would be your best candidate. I would love to because now I'm really good on planes. I want you to sit next to me though.
Okay.
So when you have the fingernail marks in your knee, that'll be me.
Catherine, thanks for coming here. It's certainly a message that I think a lot of people will enjoy reading. And you just seem to me to be a person who's having fun. Having a ball. Loving every minute of it. I've been working with Lane Bryant Stores as their national spokeswoman over the last 3 months. Do you know about how Lane Bryant got started? Do you know that story? It was one of those Paul Harvey rest of the stories. Oh, really? No, I'm not. I have a vague idea. Apparently, it's turn of the century. Apparently, years ago, women, when they were pregnant, didn't go outside. There was nothing shameful about it, but it just violated social conventions to be seen pregnant outside. And she was a dressmaker or something for a woman who just wanted to get, and so she started making larger clothing that looked flattering for this woman she worked for who was pregnant, and the Lane Bryant concept started that way. Well, I'm going to fact check that for you. And if I'm wrong, don't tell me, because it's a great story. It's a great story, and they're a great company. They've been around since the turn of the century, and they're doing some exciting things. They're owned by the Limited now, so I'm staying busy, staying happy, and hey,
it's that everyday thing. Got to be happy.
Catherine, thanks for visiting us.
Thanks for having me, Dennis. It's fun.
Okay. Be happy with yourself, but still don't overeat. I'm Dennis Daly.